Welcome back to News in Focus. Now, in a break with long-standing tradition, South Africa has handed over the G20 presidency to a junior U.S. diplomat. This comes after the White House boycotted the summit in South Africa, citing false claims of persecution of white people by the government. The Department of International Relations and Cooperation said that the G20 presidency was handed over to the U.S. yesterday. The handover of the G20 presidency took the U.S. in a low-key event in Pretoria. Now, the handover process was not immediately acknowledged through media statements, but we have DIRCO to go ahead and discuss this. And joining me is its spokesperson, Chrispin Phiri. Chrispin, always good having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Chrispin, I guess one would have wanted this handover to officially happen, of course, at Nasrec, where we were all together over this weekend. And I guess it's kind of sad. It's kind of a pity this is not happening. But we are where we are right now. And I guess we, as the world, have to deal with the situation right now, given the sort of hostile nature that is coming from the United States, especially towards South Africa.
Yeah, well, we've handed over the presidency to the embassy officials that are representing the United States of America here. And we have done so at the appropriate level, at the level of the officials who are responsible for the USA desk, our diplomats there. And we think that's the appropriate way to deal with it, given the way the US has been dealing with us. We also do then wish the US well in their presidency, which starts on the 1st of December, and look forward to seeing what their presidency holds for the G20 nations.
Chrispin, in an interview that was done with Kumbutsa Ntshavheni, she did mention that, look, South Africa will try all they can to go ahead and maintain this relationship with the United States. I had an interview with Vincent Magwenya, your colleague, and of course the presidency spokesperson, when he said all avenues remain open to the United States for trade. Is this the diplomatic way that South Africa really wants to go ahead and say that, look, despite everything, despite these false claims of a white genocide, the roads remain open, the avenues remain open for Pretoria and Washington to have diplomatic and trade agreements?
We have not shut the door on diplomacy, and we do not say that there are no issues of mutual concern or of mutual interest for us to discuss with the USA. There are, and we believe that they can be resolved and also further pursued through diplomacy. And that's what we remain open to doing. But at the same time, we are also very resolute that we will not be treated disrespectfully, and we will not tolerate any form of disrespect from any nation. We come to the table with genuine interests of the South African people, but also with a genuine interest to pursue a mutually beneficial relationship. And that's what we are about. And I think we have shown the world during this G20 what we mean by when we say solidarity, when we speak about inequality, when we speak about sustainability. All of these issues have been embraced by other nations of the world, but also most importantly, on display was our superpower, Ubuntu. And that's how we want to be treated, but that is also what we want to impart on the world. And any nation that we engage with, we want to engage with a sense of dignity, but also with a sense that we are here to cooperate at a real level, at a meaningful level. And that's the relationship we will continue to pursue with any nation, including the United States of America.
Chrispin, there was something important that President Ramaphosa mentioned during this weekend. He said that South Africa will not be bullied into submission. He's mentioned that also last week during the social summit that was had. How important was that message given, and I mean, we speak of multilateralism, we speak of a multipolar world, that countries now can step up to these, so-called superpowers, like, for example, the United States, and say that, look, we are willing to go ahead and have discussions with you, but we will not be submitted or forced into any supposed mannerisms or angles that you want to take as a country. And that what we see now, especially during the G20 presidency of South Africa, is exactly that, that there will not be this submission into something which is not in the national interest of South Africa.
Yeah, that's precisely the point right there where you have ended, is that if we believe something is beneficial to the South African people, it resolves the issues of the South African people, we're not going to waver from that. It is something that we have to pursue because also that is what the South African people demand of their government. And those are the people at the end of the day which we represent first and foremost in every arena. But also what we want to make clear, and we've made this clear in many other fora and will continue to do so, is that South Africa is not the plaything of others. South Africa is a sovereign state with its own interests, and those interests are what we will continue to pursue. But also, more importantly, is that we are also on the African continent. And this is a very, very important continent in the scheme of where geopolitics are currently. 30% of the world's critical minerals are found in the African continent. If you have a cell phone in your hand today, that cobalt is mined from the Democratic Republic of Congo. The zinc, all the minerals that put together artificial intelligence tools, that put together the elements of solar energy today and sustainable, clean, green energy today. All of that comes from the African continent, and no more either will the African continent continue to export its wealth through these minerals and in turn import finished products at the expense of the very African people. We want to ensure that these minerals are beneficiated at source, they're value added at source, and we have a system in place globally that no longer looks at Africa as an extraction pit, but as a place where industrialization can also happen. Because ultimately, industrialization speaks to jobs for our people, it speaks to expanding our economy, and it speaks to us playing an equal role in the geopolitical markets, no longer as a taker, a price taker, but now fundamentally as a big contributor to the world's development. So in South Africa, we believe that our productivity, our growth in the economy would also be growth for the African economy as a whole, will also ensure that Africa is better integrated. In other words, we have a big role in ensuring that we undo the colonial legacy that has made Africa what it is today.
Chrispin, one final question before we go to the break. A report on Business Tech had mentioned that US Senator John Kennedy wants to introduce a new bill to extend AGOA for 2 years, but this would exclude South Africa. Now, of course, this would need, a majority. As we look at the Senate House, it would need, of course, many Republicans to vote for this, but there seems to be bipartisan support for the renewal, but to have South Africa in it, especially from a Democrat perspective. I just wanted to get DIRCO's take on this because as we speak, United States is a very important trading partner with South Africa. What is DIRCO's take on this, Chrispin, as we speak right now? Because this is, again, a very important program, not just for the United States, but also for South Africa.
At the heart of AGOA is Africa's most industrialized economy, that is South Africa. So really, AGOA also only works quite well because South Africa is able to form part of it. But this is a matter that we'll continue engaging and seek to understand between those who have sought to exclude South Africa. But we do believe that our industrialized economy and our expansion to look at other markets will yield very positive results. And we will be able to still access the American market in one way or another, but also access other markets at a more larger scale to ensure that our economy is well diversified.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Chrispin Phiri, and we're going to be, of course, reviewing what we saw this weekend. History for South Africa, history for the continent, as this G20 summit took place in Johannesburg. What has this meant for diplomacy, especially from a South African perspective? Do stay tuned. News in Focus wraps up after this break. Welcome back to News in Focus. I'm still in conversation with DIRCO spokesperson Chrispin Phiri. Chrispin, I mean, you and I ran into each other quite a lot this weekend, and I guess not just for myself and you, for the entire media that were there present, on Hall 5 at Nasrec, this really felt something different, didn't it? That South Africa holding a G20 presidency represented so much more than just it for the country, but also for the African continent. I guess how significant, how massive, how important was just this weekend culminating in the year that South Africa has had this G20 presidency?
It was massive, and as you had seen in the media hall alone, I think at any given point in time, we had over 3,000 journalists there from all over the world coming to cover the first G20 summit on African soil. And I think you can attest to this. We did not disappoint. South Africa showed what we can do when we work together, when we work hand in glove towards a common interest. Many people regarded this as probably one of the best summits they've ever been to. But I think critically as well, what we saw with the world leaders, what they were discussing, was the fact that the world moved on. Multilateralism prevailed. And at the end of the day, multilateralism was reaffirmed. But I think most critically, and as I said earlier, is the fact that our presidency centered Africa's development. At the core of our G20 presidency was Africa. And that too was resoundingly affirmed by the world as an important discussion to move from. And at a time where we are seeing this pervasive move towards unilateralism, we saw the world actually reaffirming not just Africa, but multilateralism. And as you would know, multilateralism for us is a very, very core component of our foreign policy. We do not believe that one nation can resolve the world's problems. We believe that the world can be better served with multiple nations sitting at the table and pursuing a common interest genuinely. And that's what you saw over this weekend. The nations of the world coming together around South Africa, being convened by South Africa to pursue an agenda that will ensure that Africa at the end of the day is no longer an extraction pit, but an equal player at the table of trade and at the table of geopolitics. And I think many South Africans are proud, rightfully so, of what we have achieved together as a country through this G20 presidency. A lot more work still has to be done and will be done around this G20 presidency, because what I can say for sure is that the work that we've done here doesn't end at Nasrec. It actually will continue to echo in many other forums of the United Nations, of geopolitical spaces, where the South African declaration from the G20 will continuously be remembered as one that set the path for how Africa should be developed, how we should deal with very critical questions that stunt Africa's development.
Africa's development, of course, has been was the major talking point throughout this weekend, Chrispin. And I don't know if you were shocked, but I was surprised at the speed of the declaration. And this happened, of course, Saturday at midday, that this declaration had happened without the United States of America. But I guess, like you mentioned, the work now has to go beyond Nasrec. And Europe and the rest of the West, or the global North, as they may say, now really needs to commit to those pledges, commit to those declarations, because Africa really now has shown itself to be an important part of the way global politics and economics will shape the world.
Absolutely. Africa has shown itself to be an integral part of geoeconomics and geopolitics. Most of the world's conflicts are in Africa. Most of the world's minerals are in Africa. And climate change affects most African countries. So all of these issues, these polycrises that have gripped the world, a great deal of them are on the African continent. So we cannot wish away Africa. We cannot simply move on without talking about Africa. Africa is also the continent of the future, with a very youthful population. It is said that by the year 2030, most of the people of the world will be from Africa, given the population height that we are seeing. So really, Africa is going to be on the table for a very, very long time. And speaking of the declaration, the G20 declaration mentions Africa 89 times. For the first time in the history of a G20 summit, where we have Africa being so pivotal around the discussion. So really, this does show that this was Africa's summit, this was South Africa's summit, and we really came to the table to ensure that the issues that affect African countries and African states and the development of our continent are at the center of the table and are able to be taken up by various fora moving forward. One of the very critical findings that our G20 presidency has put squarely on the table, and I'll just name two, is the report commissioned by our presidency report by Nobel Peace Prize laureate Professor Joseph Stiglitz, which makes a finding that inequality is a policy choice. It's a deliberate decision by leaders to really have an economy that serves the rich and disadvantages the poor. That's a very important discussion for G20 nations to take note of, especially given the wealth concentrated amongst the G20 nations. The very critical finding, second one that we have is from the Africa Expert Panel report, which was done by former Minister Trevor Manuel. And in that report, it is found that we're seeing that countries that have a similar profile as African countries in the global north, that have a similar population size, similar economic profile, they get far more beneficial lending patterns from institutions like the IMF. They have better ratings from rating agencies as compared to African countries. We now have a scientific basis and discussion document that puts that failure on the table to look at. And we think that will go a long way in ensuring that institutions like the IMF, when providing funding to African countries, are a lot more transparent, but also rating agencies to come out clearly and explain to the markets in African countries what exactly is the criteria that they use when rating countries, and how does this apply across the board. You would hear some rating agencies say there's political instability or a lack of policy certainty in African countries, but you could find similar European countries, very so-called well-developed countries, who undergo massive political changes within a short space of time, but don't get downgraded, for example, or we don't hear that there's policy uncertainty. So those are the issues that our presidency has raised to the fore scientifically. So we're not talking of a conspiracy here. We're not talking of something that has been thumbs up. It's expert reports by very, very notable individuals in the world who have put this on the table for the world to take notice of and start to address.
One final question. We just got 2 or 3 minutes, Chrispin. It's been a difficult year diplomatically for South Africa. Of course, in January, the M23 rebels, which attacked SANDF soldiers, the trip to Washington, South Africa, though on a positive side, hosted Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and maintained its non-aligned position within the current Russia-Ukraine war. And then, of course, South Africa, you and I had this discussion saying that it will maintain its ICJ case against Israel for the genocide in Gaza. Has South Africa scored a massive diplomatic victory in this regard?
I think we've shown that our non-alignment is consistent. Our pursuit of multilateralism is consistent, but also a pursuit of an international law system, an international system that's based on international law and is based on fairness. All of these, if you look at the events of the year that has happened in our diplomatic space, all of those principles find expression. And yes, we've remained true to ourselves, and I think for that we can say, even though difficult, has been a successful year overall for South Africa, for our foreign policy.
Chrispin, always good having you on. Thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
That's Chrispin Phiri, spokesperson for the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. That's all we have for you here on News in Focus from myself, Hospital, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg. If you've missed today's episode, be sure to find it on our YouTube channel. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.